In Parshas Chukas, we read about the well-known story of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses hitting the rock, and the punishment that follows. What happens is the Jewish people stop getting the water from the well of Miriam after Miriam passes away, and they start complaining to Moshe. They say, why did you take Kahal Hashem, why did you take the nation of God out of Egypt to the wilderness to make us die from thirst? We're thirsty. To which Hashem tells Moshe, Kachas amata, take your staff, Hakel asa'am, gather the people in front of the rock, V'dibartem el asela, speak to the rock, and it will give forth meimav, it will give forth its water. What happens is, Moshe takes the staff, as he was told. He gathers the people, as he was told. But instead of speaking to the rock, he tells them, Shimuna hamayrim, listen, rebels, should we really take out water from this rock for you? And he hits the rock twice, and much water comes forth. So it seems like, for the most part, Moshe Rabbeinu did what he had to do, and the water came out. Yet Hashem tells him, Yan hamantem bi, because you didn't believe in me, lahaktisheni, to sanctify my name in front of the Jewish people. Therefore, you're not going to be the leader to bring the Jews into Eretz Yisrael. You will die in the midbar, and someone else will need to take them in. And the story is very, very perplexing, and many and most commentaries deal with it. If you look in the Chumashim that have commentaries, over here there's many pages. What exactly was Moshe's big sin? Okay, so Hashem said to speak to the rock, and not to hit the rock, and Moshe hit the rock. That's the big deal, that for that reason he shouldn't take them into Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't seem like such a big sin. In fact, if we look earlier in Chumash, we see that earlier Hashem did tell him that he should hit the rock. A similar story happened in Parshas Beshalach. The Jews just got out of Egypt. They told Moshe they were thirsty. Why did you take us out of Egypt? Hashem tells Moshe, Eid ma'atus kaluni, this nation's going to kill me. And Hashem told him over there, Kachas hamata, what do we say in the Chumash? Take umatcha asher hikisa bayis hayar, take the staff with which you hit the river and you did the plagues in Egypt, v'hikisa batsur, and you should hit the rock and it will give out forth water. So earlier Moshe was told to hit the rock. Over here he was told to speak to the rock. So it's close enough. He was already told this before. He made a mistake. Why is this the big sin with which he cannot enter Israel with, and he was given such a grave punishment? Question number one. Question number two, this itself we need to understand. Why earlier was Moshe told to hit the rock, and now he was told to speak to the rock? Question number three. It seems like Hashem was almost giving him a little bit of a setup. If he was really only meant to speak to the rock and not to hit the rock, why was he told, Kachas amata, take the staff with you? That seems to intimate also there might be some use of this staff. If the whole point was just to speak to the rock, why was he told to bring the staff? And fourth of all, if really this was a big mistake that Moshe hit the rock, why did it end up working? Seemingly, if he did the wrong thing, it shouldn't have ended up bringing out any water. So these are four of the questions that we're going to delve into today. The explanation is based off the writings of the Tzemach Tzedek in Ara Torah, and there is a beautiful, it's written over there very cryptic and Kabbalistically. There is a nice shir from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson on his website, the yeshiva.net, that spells this out beautifully, an audio shir, and also from a series of books called Torah Me'et Zion, from a yeshiva, a famed yeshiva, Yeshivas Har Etzion, that spells out this idea at length, and obviously we're going to try to bring it forth in short and with a very powerful takeaway. There's a difference between the story that happened in Parshas Beshalach, where Hashem told Moshe to hit the rock, and over here where he told him to speak to the rock. And this is hinted to in a medrash in Yalkut Shimoni. In Yalkut Shimoni it says, this is the lashon, Kshahanar katan rabbe mako malamdai, when a child is young, the teacher hits him to teach him. When he's older, kivan shehigdil, b'dibur hum yasrai, when he gets older, he speaks to him in order to educate him and to discipline him and to give him ethics. And that, says the Medrash, is a difference between Moshe in the first story about hitting the rock and over here about speaking to the rock. To spell this out, the Tzemach Tzedek says there's a difference between the rock mentioned earlier when Moshe hit it and the rock mentioned now when he was told to speak to it. The rock mentioned earlier was called a tzur, v'hikisa batsur. A tzur represents, said the Tzemach Tzedek, a very harsh rock that has no moisture in it. It's just a dry, hard rock. But this week, Hashem tells Moshe, "V'dibartem el hasela," speak to the rock. He doesn't use the same word tzur. He uses the word sela. Sela means a rock that has moisture in it. It has water in it. That's why, if you look, the pasuk doesn't say that it will give forth water. It says v'nasan meimav. It will give forth its water. In other words, what's the big difference, according to Chassidus and according to Pnimis and Yanim, in life, in these two stories? Earlier, Moshe Rabbeinu was leading a nation of slaves. They just got out of Egypt. They didn't yet have redemption in them. The only language slaves speak is one of a whip, is to be chastised and to be powered and controlled, because otherwise they're going to run loose and havoc will happen. They need to have a whip. They need to be hit. They don't yet have their own water. They don't yet have their own toichin. Their soul isn't yet used to redemption and being free people. They're still young, and it's a nation still in infancy. That's why over there was appropriate. Hashem said, take your stick, the stick of power. The people that are slaves, people that are immature, need to be shown power. Otherwise, they're going to utilize the freedom in a wrong and toxic way. They need to be shown power and control, and the only way you could handle a nation of slaves is with control. They're still at sword. They don't have their own water. They don't have their own life. So therefore, you need to control them. That's why take the staff. Which staff? The staff with which you did the miracles in Egypt. The staff that shows power. The staff that shows that you could overpower even the king of Egypt. But in this week's Parsha, we're not compared to a little child, like the Medrash says, that the little child needs to be hit. At this point, we're the nation not of slaves, but the nation that's about to enter redemption. And this nation, says Hashem, is a changed nation. At this point, they have their own mayim. At this point, they're a selah. They're not a dead, dry rock that if they're influenced and if they're spoken to as free people, they're just going to take advantage. At this point, you're dealing with people that are ready for redemption. And to take a nation that's ready for redemption, to take them into the promised land, you need to be able to v'dibartem ala selah. They don't need to be whipped into shape. They need to be spoken to and uplifted. V'nasan meimav, and they will give forth their own water. Trust them and see that they have redemption in them already. And you don't need to power them into, we spoke about this once, the difference of control and influence, or control and chinuch. Control is usually step one in chinuch, to show that yesh balabayas, there's someone here, you can't just do whatever you want. But ultimately, what's the soul of chinuch? What's the soul of education? When someone gets that message, when someone already has a bit of maturity to them, is speak to them and bring forth, influence them and inspire them to bring forth their soul to the table, and don't be threatened by them, by embracing them for who they are. That's the nation of redemption. They need to be spoken to because they have mayim already. As the Medrash compares them not to a little child, but to an older child that's about to leave the home, that's an adult already. Over there you don't smack them. Over there you speak to them, influence them. You don't try to control them, but you try to influence and uplift them. Why was he told kachas hamata? Actually, the Rashbam, in a different context, says that over here this was a different staff. Earlier, Hashem said this was a staff, asher hikisa bayis hayar, with which he whipped the river. Over here, the mata we're referring to is the one that was just used by Aaron to blossom almonds. And the lesson unpacked in this, the difference of the two staffs, is there's two types of, a staff could connote power and whipping. A staff could also show exaltedness and leadership. Earlier, the point was to overpower a slave of nations, to show them that there's power and control over here, and you can't do whatever you want. Negative chinuch, controlling chinuch. And for that, we needed the staff that showed power and that showed that it could bring plagues. But over here, the nation saw that already. But over here, what the nation needed, what they were crying for, thirsty for water, means they wanted to see a Hashem that could give them life, not a Hashem that could just give them power. They didn't need to see leadership that was just able to strike and overpower when things go wrong. But this was a nation that was ready to be influenced, and they wanted to see, can Hashem take death and bring life? Can we not just be punished, but can we be uplifted by our leader? And when Moshe Rabbeinu failed to do so, he wasn't punished to not take the Jews into Egypt. This was the automatic consequence of what he did. Hashem was saying, you're not ready. You are the leader of a nation of slaves, and you brought them and did a great job to bring them here. But the leadership that they need in order to get to redemption, the influence, the leader that they need to bring them into redemption is one that will trust them and to speak to them and to uplift them, not to just control them. That's why the mata over here was used, not a mata that was able to bring death, but a mata that would actually become a dead staff, like we spoke about last week, and to be able to blossom and bring life. And this has a very powerful connotation, like we see these days. Chinuch that just is a form of controlling doesn't work. Just trying to threaten and punish falls flat with youth these days, because we're the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Mashiach. And the generation that's about to enter the promised land. Maybe in earlier generations it was appropriate to threaten and just to try to control, and as long as you have a classroom under control, a family under control, that means you did effective chinuch. These days that's not enough. Our generation needs connection, it needs attachment, it needs to be uplifted, and it needs to be influenced for people to trust their own souls and to allow the real v'nasan meimav for their water to come out. Sorry, I forgot to address that last question. Hashem told them to speak to the Sela v'nasan meimav, it will bring forth its water. But when Moshe hit it, maybe it worked, but it doesn't say v'nasan meimav. It says v'yatzu mayim rabim, a lot of water came out. If we just try to control our children, maybe it's going to work for a little bit. We're going to see a lot of water, but it's not its water. So the moment they leave our net, the moment they leave our control, it could fall apart. The only way to bring a child into redemption, or as the Rebbe said, if we're about to enter Mashiach, shliach with yud. If we live as a shliach, the gematria of shliach is 348. The gematria of Mashiach is 358. There's a difference of 10. And the Rebbe says that a shliach living with his 10 koichas hanefesh. In other words, if we realize that we are a shliach, if we realize that there's a nitzutz, there's a spark of Mashiach in each one of us, that's what brings Mashiach. In order to enter the promised land, we have to first realize that we have the redemption in us. We have to first go through a geula pratis in order to go through a geula klalis. And therefore, chinuch that is just about control doesn't work these days. That worked in earlier generations. Our generation needs v'nasan as meimav for us to realize the potential and the redemptive atom, the spark of God and the spark of Mashiach that each one of us has. And when we access that, we bring Mashiach to the whole world. This we see very much by the Rebbe coming from Gimel Tammuz now, how the Rebbe was here to uplift the generation, not with threats, not with control, not with negativity, but to engage, to connect, to empower each individual, and through that was able to change the world. As when someone one time came to the Rebbe and was complaining about the youth of America, he said that in America you can't tell the kids what to do anything. So the Rebbe looked at him and smiled and said, but you could teach them to do everything. And this is the soul of redemptive chinuch, and what we need to do, and the proof is in the pudding. When engaging our children, when engaging our students, when engaging people positively with a Chabad House approach, that you're valued, your Torah and mitzvahs matter, you're a soul and I recognize your soul, then the staff blossoms and the Sela brings forth its mayim, and that is the nourishment that the generation needs before entering the promised land with the coming of Mashiach. Have a great Shabbos.